Welcome to the Leader's Agenda, a series dedicated to reimagining leadership within life sciences. My name is Tarja Huuskonen, and I'm your host. The Leader's Agenda invites insights and perspectives from some of the very best leaders of our time. Wisdom that you too can build into your own leader's agenda.
So today we have a very special episode for Leader's Agenda. This is a special on a very personal level for me. Those of you know about my background know that I have two really important passions in life. One is to affect how we lead healthcare innovation through life sciences and connecting life sciences more closely with patients. And my other passion is as a patient advocate myself and brain injury survivor. And that is actually one of the reasons why today's episode is so important to me. I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Jenny Clarke, and she is the co-founder and CEO of the SameYou organization, which we're going to hear a lot more about. But she's also a formidable spokesperson for brain injury and recovery, not just in UK, where she is calling from today, but also globally. Welcome, Jenny, to our show.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very privileged to be here.
So, SameYou organization is your baby, in a sense, in that you were a founding member with your daughter. Can you give us a little bit of a story about what is SameYou organization all about and what is its reach today in terms of the global view?
Well, actually, it's my baby's baby because we are a charity. We are registered in Delaware. We're registered in the UK. And we are an organization which is very small and will always remain small, because what we are here to do is to draw attention, to bring awareness to the issues around brain injury. Now, that's stroke and traumatic brain injury, which is under the name of acquired brain injury. So that isn't an injury that you have at birth in your brain or something that you have as a degenerative disease, but it's the things that happen to you as a catastrophic event, a sudden experience that completely changes your world, knocks everything, all the things that you thought you knew about yourself and your life and your family knew about you, it just goes out of the window. So it's a very, very important and very, very under-discussed issue. And when we came into the problem, it was because of my daughter Amelia having 2 aneurysms and 2 brain hemorrhages. And of course, we moved into a world we just didn't know anything about. And what really caused us to start the charity and to try and bring action and awareness globally to the problem is that 1 in 3 people will actually experience some sort of a brain injury at some point in their lives. Now, that's incredible numbers. I mean, there are millions. We estimate there's about 155 million people in the world right now living with the consequences of brain injury. And that is, we think, a very underreported number because data isn't captured for all of the community. So you have to have a very serious brain injury to be part of that number. But we know from the people that write to us that it's a lot broader than that.
That is a magnificent number right there. And I think to take it down to a personal level, you said 1 in 3 people.
That's right.
So if we, oftentimes I think when we talk about these things, especially things that have to do with brain still, we don't talk about them in everyday life as much as we tend to talk about if we have a heart issue or if we have some other issue. Yeah. And consequently, we don't necessarily think that it can happen to us. I can tell you as a survivor, that traumatic event that I had 6 years ago, I was kayaking quite happily and talking about what an amazing world it is and what an amazing life I've had. And an hour later, I was dying. So we don't realize that it can happen to any one of us and that it actually is a reality for so many people among us that may not even be talking about it. right? Even after surviving it, right?
Yes, I think that the message about it being a major health issue just isn't communicated. And I think one of the problems about that is that, well, I think there's two really we could talk about. The first is that it's a stigma to admit to having a brain injury. I think that if you have got facial disabilities, if you've got physical disabilities, if people look at you and you think, you don't look as maybe you looked before, that is something that people can't handle. And so that's one of the huge jobs that everybody needs to get behind, to really try and explain that, if somebody is in front of you in a supermarket queue and they're fumbling with their cards, or they can't really quite communicate, then probably not drunk, they're probably not on drugs, and they might well have a brain injury.
Yeah, yeah. So going back then to the SameYou organization, what's the mission of SameYou today?
So what we want to do is to, as well as bringing attention to the issue, we focus very much on young adults. And that's because my daughter was in her early 20s when she had her first hemorrhage. And then when she had her second intervention, which led to open head surgery and strokes, she was only 25. So people don't really associate brain injury with young adults, because brain injury is usually, if you do understand it, you think it's a stroke. And people have the wrong impression that strokes only happen to old people. And so what we're trying to do is to try and narrow the gap between what the clinical world provides in terms of neurorehabilitation and what the survivor and their families and their loved ones need. And after doing this for a few years, it still amazes me what a big gap there is. So we're trying to see what small steps that we can do, and how and who we can collaborate with, because no one can do anything by themselves. And so how do we start to build a community and link our community with other communities, whether these are clinicians across the States, across Europe, across the world. We have good contacts in Australia and New Zealand, for instance. And then how do we actually take some action collectively? Because so many people, the problem is such a big problem. You have to start somewhere. And so what we're trying to figure out is the key areas in 3 different topics, which we've already funded and tried to build relationships with.
Okay, and let's go back to those topics a little bit later, but I have to comment on something else that really strikes me as very special about your organization, and that is its name. And that was actually one of the first reasons why I got very interested to look into the details of the organization and what it represents. SameYou is a very intentional choice for the name of the organization. Can you tell the story behind the name?
Yes, of course. So when Amelia decided to tell her story to the New Yorker and to launch the charity, because she told her story, she didn't want to tell a story and have nothing behind it. And it was a hard decision, actually, to come out into the public, which was quite a few years.
I have to just interrupt I'm sorry, for a little bit. You mentioned Amelia by name, and we've talked about your daughter a little bit. For those who may not be familiar with the story, Amelia, of course, is an actress, a quite well-known actress. So coming out with the story, the statement you just made, was a really important step and an important.
It was, because she had she just filmed the first season of Game of Thrones, and she was one of the main players playing Khaleesi, and so she had her first hemorrhage immediately between episodes, very conveniently. And then 2 years later, while she was still filming Game of Thrones, she had her much more severe open head surgery. And again, it was between filming. So it was very, very lucky that she is, perfectly all right. If anyone who's actually had a brain injury can ever be perfectly all right again, but she has no lasting impairment, so that's wonderful. So when we started the charity, we obviously worked with a creative agency to say, well, how to really distill the essence behind Amelia's vision about creating a movement of people to get behind brain injury recovery. And so we had a selection. And so as soon as the creatives brought on this particular set, and she saw SameYou, she took a gasp and said, that really resonates with me. And it resonates because if you've had a brain injury, people look at you differently. People think that you're very different. And sadly, in many cases, physically and cognitively, you are very, very different. But inside, you're still the same. You're always the same person. And I think that's what everybody wants to have as acknowledged, that you are the same. And so we think that, seeing whatever we all can do to help people feel the same and give them inspiration to keep on their long, hard journey to recovery is important.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that story. And that also then leads me to another question. You yourself are also a survivor, a brain aneurysm survivor. Is that right?
Well, I've got aneurysms, yes, and we didn't know. So I think there's still so much that's unknown about aneurysms. And our charity, by the way, is not just about aneurysms, because the impact of many brain injuries is very similar. But yes, Amelia's 2 aneurysms, they were called mirror aneurysms. And we were asked, was anybody in the family had anything like it? And we said, no, not at all. And then a number of years later, in fact, about 7 years ago, I didn't feel well. I was admitted to A&E. And they said, actually, you're okay. But I had an MRI and they could see that I had got 2 aneurysms and now I've got 3 aneurysms. But I've got one coiled and the others are not coiled because of their size. And I'm fine with that.
So you didn't know. So when Amelia had her episode, you had no idea that you also were carrying probably aneurysms already at that point in your own brain. Oh my goodness.
Not at all. Not at all.
Well, my story is very similar in that I had absolutely no idea that there was anything going on in my brain, and it was 2 aneurysms, and I'm now, happily carrying 2 coils up there that are made by Stryker, actually one of the medical device companies. And I'm very much resonating with this conversation around what happens afterwards, so I think that there is sort of this, the triage is one thing, especially if you have a brain injury from any reason, and that's traumatic, whether that's through an accident of some sort, or whether it's an aneurysm that burst. In that triage period, there's a lot that happens. But what I find is kind of the forgotten part of our journey, even whether it's about from an innovation perspective or from the care perspective, is what happens after you leave the hospital. What happens when you have to meet the world all over again, now having survived, but really wanting to integrate yourself back into normal life. That's a really hard part to.
It's really hard, and it's really extraordinary talking to you, meeting you, talking to you with a different story, but such a similar story. And I think that from all the other people that we've heard from, and the thousands of people who have written to us since Amelia spoke out about what happened to her, what people say is it's like falling off the edge of a cliff. You leave your acute hospital care or your inpatient rehab, if you are seriously ill enough to have inpatient rehab, or in fact lucky enough, even though you need it, to have the inpatient rehab, because it's so far and few between. And depending on where you are in the world, and we're talking mainly to America at the moment, and so it's obviously to do with your insurance and difficulties of payment. But in a way, that is almost a side issue, because there just always aren't enough resources, trained resources, to cover all the different therapeutic needs that the huge volume of people need. In the States, you're incredibly lucky to have wonderful facilities of rehabilitation. And we are very fortunate to work with a number of them. But if you look at the world in general, it's just very, very scarce. And so I think there's huge inequality about brain injury recovery provision, because if you have got the ability to look for it, to find it, to fund it, and to know you need it, that's one thing. That's difficult enough. But there are still millions of people out there throughout the world who just have no ability to find any help.
Absolutely. And that includes actually, you mentioned that there are some amazing facilities here in the United States, and that's true. On the other hand, I will say this. I would consider myself probably an informed patient in many ways, because I have worked in healthcare all of my life and have been fortunate to meet some amazing people, both on the provider side as well as on the life sciences side. But walking out of that hospital myself, guess what I got? I got a stroke information kit from the hospital. It said nothing at all about any brain aneurysm related things, nor some of the things that I was going through. And yes, I could see that I could contact here for this kind of help. If I needed help with my balance issues, I could contact here for my speech issues, and maybe I could, but a lot of other things were not even covered. For instance, that more emotional side of that recovery. So what I found interesting was you're quite alone in that space. You have to do your own research. You have to find the resources. And then, to your point, access to care in this country, of course, also has a lot to do with reimbursement. So if you're not fortunate enough to have insurance that allows you to actually get that kind of support, you still don't get it. And so this access to care and inequality around the care is a global issue. I truly believe that.
Yes, it is. And it is such a huge issue. You've got to start somewhere. So when we did some due diligence in the States, looking at what is actually available and what innovations there are that we could maybe, help further develop, we really saw and these are obvious categories, but they are important nonetheless. The three things that we see as seriously missing is there's lack of research in neuro rehab. There is not necessarily lack of research in the brain in general, but of course, it's our most complex, vital, and organ that has our humanity and our whole life inside it. And lots of people can argue with that statement, but it feels that it is it's not our heart, but it feels like it's the heart of us. I think that that the research is very important. We think that resources is vital, because it doesn't matter what technology you've got if you haven't got trained and caring people that has the interaction with the patient and their families, it doesn't work. And then the third thing is innovation. So while there is a lot of innovation in medical devices, and I think there's some tremendous things happening with coils and stents, that is still sort of prevention, or it's prevention from or it's ability to save one's life. But the innovation in actual recovery technologies, and we hear about heat, we hear about infrared, we hear about implants, sound, all these things can help, but everything really is based on the biopsychosocial environment. And even that isn't really interrogated enough to understand what people, how people can benefit from some more interventions in certain areas. And in particular, you've already mentioned it, you've called it emotional recovery, and we have started to call it mental health.
So let's talk about that just a little bit more then. I'm going to start with number 3, and I'll go back to all the way to number 1 out of these 3 that you just mentioned. On this innovation space, are there things that your organization is currently involved in to start closing the gap, as you said earlier?
Yes. So I think the program that I'm most proud of, given that we're only 3 years old, is that in lockdown, the beginning in March 2020, we'd been working with University College Hospital London and University College London. So university and then a wonderful hospital together. And they form really the heart, the centre of neuro care in the UK. Has a colloquial name of Queen Square, which is the actual place where the buildings are, and we had an office there. So we were asked at lockdown, is there anything that we could think of that would help people, because they were having to shut down wards and shut down their in-house inpatient skills. And so we obviously talked to them about technology and how technology could do it. And so we encouraged them to look at group rehab online. So it is something that they have named as with an acronym of NROL, Neuro Rehabilitation Online. And we funded a pilot. Amelia did a call out, and we funded a pilot in March 2020. And it reached many people. We've had third-party surveys on it. And the thing about it is that you can get 8, 10, 12 people on a screen, and you can have various therapists taking you through all of the different services that you would get if you were in person in a clinic. But the great innovation by accident is that you have people together who share the same problems. They don't feel alone, and they form a peer-to-peer group after the actual treatment is finished.
I love that. So it's really it's a combination of the more the therapeutic side with professionals guiding
Yeah.
a lot of that process there, but also building the community of the common experience where that emotional support is also coming from others who are
Very
going through
much
the
so.
same.
Very much so. And so if you're looking, yes, if you're looking at the complete circle, holistic care, you have your cognitive issues, you have your upper limb, you have your gait, your balance, your speech and language, and then you have all the multiple cognition issues, but then you have this emotional recovery, mental health, and the ability to give you confidence about your anxieties, your depressions, waking up in the morning thinking you're going to die. How do you get that? How do you get support to help you understand that you're not the only one that feels that, and that these things are there, but you can overcome them?
Do you see this type of a group rehab online? I think that's how you described it. Do you see this model as something that could be replicated anywhere, or could be replicated also over large distances, long distances?
Absolutely. And so this is one of the great innovations that I think that is really untapped in all areas of healthcare. And so what we've done is that we funded it in London. Then with connections, we funded it through a grant from the National Lottery in the UK. And we've got 5 hospitals and a university doing a trial for 2 years in Lancashire, which is north in the UK. And then I've been in Wales the last couple of days, and we're hoping that we can do a trial there. So it's being rolled out through the NHS as an offer. And after 2.5 years of development, that's pretty unheard of. So I think it just shows that the evidence that we've got, both from the patient survivors and the clinicians, that it actually enables you to save money, to be able to see more people, and very importantly, it's the accessibility. If you live in a rural location, or you have got many miles to go from a neuro rehab hospital, it's just like anything that we all know about, is that if you can actually meet a clinician and have the interactive experience, doesn't really matter where you are. You just want the space to be able to tell your story, to hear what the problem is, and to get professional guidance and therapeutic help to make you feel better.
I want one of those pilots here. I want to see one of those pilots right here in the United States.
Let's do it. Who's going to do it with us?
Yeah, so maybe we need to put an invitation out there to the world in the United States to see who wants to pilot this here. I can see so much value coming out of that. Absolutely. Now, the other areas that you talked about, so we talked a little bit about the innovation and the neuro rehab, the resources that you mentioned, trained and caring resources. Okay, so now again, one more time, I have to just do a little, going back in my own experience. I have to say, I absolutely was so impressed once I became conscious, which took a while. But once I was able to actually start observing what was happening in the hospital while I was there, I was absolutely impressed by the level of care. And this was specifically in this very special unit, right? But even down to the to the level of having a dedicated nurse who my sons told me that she was the general. Nobody could enter my room and unless she said yes, and she would count the minutes that they were allowed to actually speak to me, so that my brain would not get too much, too much. I guess stress of the early interventions, but again, that is a very specialized unit. So when you sort of talk about this, having trained and caring personnel, what does it mean? What does it need to mean so that it can really cover a wider spectrum of our experience?
So I think there's a couple of ways to look at it, isn't it? There. So I think that when we started, and Amelia and I were talking about, if we could do only one thing, what would that one thing be that, from her point of view? And she said something that I'll never forget. And she said that how important her nurse was. Her nurse is Tina Stevens, her London nurse, and we still are in contact with Tina, even though we don't need to be, for Amelia's sake. But what we felt was that having somebody to sit near you, COVID allowing, to hold your hand, and to actually be there to explain what's happened to you, because in many cases, neurosurgeons and radiologists don't actually tell you exactly what happened for various reasons, practical reasons. They don't know so much if you just go into some trauma, and then afterwards everything is very busy, and they don't always know the implications. So I think having a nurse be somebody that can speak to you in plain language that you can understand, to give you that information so you know what's happened to you. That's number one. And then the nurses are the glue between, your great, brilliant neurosurgeons, and they all are, and they've saved your life. But how are you going to have somebody to help you live your life to the full again? And so a nurse is perhaps the most undervalued member of the medical profession. They certainly are. And while we're doing this recording, the UK has taken unprecedented action to strike, nurses strike, because of very low pay and the high level of inflation that's currently happening in the UK and around the world. So nurses are really important. So we spend quite a lot of our time trying to connect, particularly with young, early career nurses around the world. And there's an amazing organization called Nursing Now. And we've been with them since the start. And that was, they were there to really look at the UN goals and to see how to spread universal health coverage. And the only way you can really increase health around the world, and particularly in developing countries, is to better equip nurses to take more control over disease states. And so we're working with them on various projects, trying to encourage young nurses to get involved in neuro rehabilitation. But I suppose the large thing that we have been able to do is through the Royal College of Nursing Foundation in the UK, we have funded and developed with Edinburgh University and a postgraduate module. So it's for neurological nurses who've got some experience. It's not an early career thing, but it's a module that has, it's online. So we wanted to be blended, but because of COVID, it couldn't be. So there's 3 modules: learning how to research and the importance of clinical trials and what a nurse can do to help the whole concept of research, to get the data, to prove the evidence of the need to get more services. The second one is the physical aspects of neuro recovery. And the third one is the mental health aspects. So it's the only training program, we believe, in the world that covers these 3 things for specialist nurses.
And this is available now. This is happening now. Very good.
Yes, so our first cohort of 35 nurses, doesn't sound much, but it's a good start, have gone through, and we've had the graduation ceremony this summer. And then the second cohort is starting now. And I think there's endless ways of making this portable around the world with Edinburgh University. And I think we were very cognizant of that because we were very lucky to work with a number of nurses in the US who contributed to the development of this education program. And so, there's some similarities.
Yeah, and you mentioned this Nursing Now organization. Is that a global organization as well? So they're focusing globally as well. So let's talk a little bit about the US aspect of these things, because I know you have several collaborations going on here as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Love to. So Amelia's second brain injury was when she was in the States. And so we have got a rather interesting experience of having same problem and how it's helped and what the facilities are in London, in the UK and in the States. So we went first throughout the States to look at who we might want to partner with as our first partnership, because we never want to create an organization. We only want to make change through partnerships. So that partnership model is vital. And we met many wonderful organizations, and we decided that we would fund Spalding Rehab Hospital in Boston. So as you know, they're part of the Mass General Harvard group, and it's run by a wonderful, wonderful man called Ross Safont. And he has a team of young investigators working, funded by SameYou, to look at resilience in young adults after brain injury. So this is a really interesting topic, and it's something that hasn't been looked at before. And so the outcome measures that we want to take is to try and understand why one person has a certain brain trauma, another person has a similar one, and then one survives and thrives and the other one can't. Not for physical reasons, but the environmental, biopsychosocial environment. And so that's now it's about a year and a half of the program. And so I'm intrigued. It's a 3-year program. I'm intrigued to find out what that actually is going to mean, because it could have wonderful implications for new interventions that can really, change people's outlook.
I think that the topic itself, just the topic of that resilience, is totally new. I'm not sure that anybody else has actually looked into it for any age group, but also specifically young adults. What made the choice to be that age group? And
so I think first of all, the reality of my daughter's being young when she had her problems, and secondly, if you're young, you haven't even, I say young, we're sort of talking roughly between 18 and 30, 18, 30, 35. You're starting out on life. So many people don't even know where they're going, what direction their life will lead them, or how they want to take it. And then you have a brain trauma, and then you actually have this extraordinary, awful impact. And so you really lose your identity, you lose yourself. So this loss of self is catastrophic for anyone, as both you and I know, at any age. But if you're young and you don't really know where you are already, it is a serious, serious impediment to how you're going to live your life. And so we feel very, very strongly that this is a vital importance for our society to be able to take care of our young people better. And in this case, people just don't even realize that young people have this sort of issue.
So I look forward to hearing more about those results. Will there be some interim reports, or do we wait until the end of the 3-year study before we hear?
No. There's interim reports, yes, and they've already got them. But we're quite a small organisation. We would love a few more resources to be able to communicate what we're doing a bit better. But there will be, if you look at our website, which is SameYou.org, you will see reports on what we're doing with Spalding. So that's something that is really exciting. And we have a couple more relationships that are at different stages.
Now, one is here in California, I'm pretty sure, Northern California.
Northern California.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So we sort of figured that, UCSF would be a really great university and hospital to get involved with. And we figured that for a number of reasons. And then just because doing due diligence and finding who's doing what, we kept on having names given to us about the pioneers, the innovators in neuro rehab. And so there's some wonderful people there, including a guy called Wade Smith, who I've met in person, who is really trying to get funding to build out more and more rehab in UCSF. But we also met somebody called Kathryn. And so Kathryn is a neurologist, and she is very experienced. And we started talking before COVID and said, let's do something. And so what we have developed with Kathryn, after the long gap of COVID, where she was obviously doing much more important clinical work, is that SameYou is finding volunteers who may or may not have had brain injury, but can be a support group to Kathryn to work with her survivors and their families who have been through Kathryn's rehab and then have got follow-up facilities to go to, or services to keep on with their recovery journey. And so it's admin support, but with a warm and understanding person who can actually empathize with how people are feeling and understand what it feels like to be on this journey where you really don't have that much support, but to find out what support has worked for them, why they may or may not have gone to an appointment, and is there anything that they can help to supplement the clinical staff at UCSF.
So part of it is really behavioral research, right? And understanding kind of what the patient themselves or their family, what they would do or not do in context of their journey.
Yes. So that particular piece currently is not research, but it is obviously will be noted down, but not as a proper research survey. But what Kathryn and her team have done is to identify many areas or organizations, should I say, in the Bay Area in the US, where people can receive help after a brain injury. And so she's compiled this list. It's on the UCSF website. And it's on our website. And so what we're trying to do is to signpost people in the UK and in the US to services, because that is extraordinary. One of these, in this world of every information everywhere all the time, it's still really hard to find where you can go for help when you've had a brain injury.
So this is a directory, you said?
A neuro directory, a neuro rehab directory, correct.
And you are saying we would have this here as well?
Well, so Kathryn's done the research in the Bay Area. And so we're working with her to see how, so we've got a small neuro directory on our website. And so that's got a few of the organizations in the UK. And so what we're doing is we're hoping to try and find some more funding to be able to build out this, to make it, in fact, in the future, AI, so it's voice recognition managed, but at the moment, just a geographic, put in your zip code and you find out where your resources might be. So we're starting that in the Bay Area, and we haven't got the resources or the funds to increase it, but our plan would be working and trying to find the resources on the East Coast as well, and then start in the center, Chicago area. So yes, our plan would be that we would, not for every single part of the US, but to work with people, because many people may have already thought of this and done it. But how do you find out? How do you join up all these dots?
Well, and you're absolutely right, because I think that in sort of a micro scale, many things may be actually in place in spots. Yeah. But we don't have those spots connected to one another at all. And actually, that was really my experience. It was impossible to find what's available and where. And I watched these online support groups for survivors. They're the grassroots groups that are started by survivors. And what is interesting about that is it's just like the good news and the bad news is when you keep reading the stories online and the asks and the needs over there, you realize how much just basic information is needed to be out there. And But then the other thing that happens is when that information is not there, or when there's not the access to some professional resources, well, what do? As human beings, we want to support each other. So then we also start giving advice. And one of my cautions is always to say, I can't give medical advice, for instance, so be sure to talk to your doctor, but this portal idea, and I'm going to call it a portal because that's what comes in my mind when I listen to, when you're talking about your directory. The portal idea is wonderful because if it does actually allow the individual person or someone from their family to go and access that information, that is a treasure. That's a treasure in this process, absolutely. And I can see that it will take quite a bit of collaboration, quite a bit of resources to be able to make that happen. But my goodness, that would be a fantastic thing.
And we sort of naively thought if we start in the Bay Area, we've got wonderful Kathra and her resource library already, but also the Bay Area is full of, the world's leading technologists. Maybe we could get some pro bono support. So far we haven't found any, but I'm sure there's some wonderful brains who might have association with brain injury or stroke.
Well,
who
Jenny,
might want to.
Let's hope that one of those organizations is watching this show. So how about let's put a real invitation out there. So we are looking for, go ahead.
Yes, we're looking for technologists, a tech company to come and work with us to really build out a nationwide US neuro directory, giving people access to the recovery services that are out there and signpost people to them.
Wonderful. Take that invitation to heart, and you can get a hold of Jenny through the SameYou.org website.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I volunteer also to make connections. So feel free to contact either one of us. So let's talk a little bit about just some of these patient-related things. I'm very patient-centric in the medical innovation side as well. And I just want to kind of go back to, we talked a lot about the patient experience in how in their journey, and also looking at that journey holistically. And I guess, what I'm getting out of this conversation partly is that most of our innovation has really been for good reason in that treatment space. So when something has happened, we have to save the patient. And there's some amazing, amazing innovation there. The two places where I think, we are lacking today is partly the diagnostics in the front end to understand what are the chances. I mean, you didn't know you were walking around with an aneurysm. I didn't know that. There's a lot of us from a genetic side. So if the injury is actually for that reason, we just don't know. And so there's some space probably still there. Part of that is education, but part of it is also, can we find biomarkers? Can we use better data, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that I was at Cardiff University yesterday with the Welsh Health Minister and some other senior people, and we were looking at some of the innovations, and I was amazed to see this something they call the hypers. I've got to remember exactly what it's called, but it's a scanner. It's a portable scanner, and what it does, and it's been funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so it's a fraction of the price of a major MRI. So it's a portable MRI that can be potentially put into ambulances, put into doctors' surgeries. So when people are suffering, having a seizure, or obviously having a stroke or something like that, or having their brain trauma, that's a way of giving better diagnostics at the front end. And I was very, very impressed with that. I think it's called a hyperfine scanner, and so there's things like that, and then I think that the recovery piece, that is, I really don't. I met a few people that talk about brain repair. I met people at USC and UCLA talking about brain repair. I have very few in Europe that actually uses that word, but I do believe that there are some wonderful innovations happening to help heal the brain. The brain with plasticity is so incredible anyway, and it heals itself to a certain extent. But how wonderful to think of a future where there will be accelerated healing and people be able to regain elements that they thought might be lost forever in terms of mobility or voice or memory. And I think it is coming, but I think, again, nobody really is and if people are out there saying, oh yes, we're doing it, I'd love to meet you and hear who you are.
Likewise, I would too, because this is actually the new space. You know, I've had a chance to have some other folks here discussing the brain mapping. For instance, Myung Jung, who started a lot of that effort, or was a powerful force, starting the main brain initiative here in the United States. And so where we are with that initiative right now is a lot of that mapping has been done, and we are at the start of being able to now take that and put that into good application. And to me, so this is like the time to really understand better what's going on in that brain. Like you said, our brains are very resilient. So if we can take that information that we're learning about the human brain and really concentrate on those few things, you know, how can we put that resilience to work when we are recovering from a brain injury? That is a great question. So my goodness, we are going to initiate a lot of invites here, because now I'm inviting also all those organizations who might be looking at that space to let us know about it, right? Because a lot of people don't know about this if there's something going on.
Exactly.
And I have a feeling we need more things to be going.
We do. But you know, there's all these great things that we're hoping and wishing and praying and trying to hassle and get done. But the things immediately, the things that can help people immediately this minute today. And that's what we've been so humbled by, the outpouring from people explaining what they need. And sometimes it's quite simple. And we have got some basic pillars within our very small organization. There's only 3 of us. And that is run by the wonderful Claire Roberts. We have a comms plan that takes some of the stories and the information from people. And with amazing volunteers, we have about 16 volunteers around the world who give up their time, obviously pro bono, and work and support us to fill out our small organization so we can make our website as good as it is and to offer these simple signposting services. So we have something we call survivors portraits. So we now have a process. When somebody writes to us, we can ask them if they would like actually their story to be published. And then we have a process for doing that. We also have got something that we call recovery at home videos. So again, when I worked at Capgemini and CSC and all these wonderful tech companies I used to run business development and marketing for, I would have been, would have looked at a different level of professionalism, shall we say. But these are wonderful homemade videos by clinicians, mainly in the UK at the moment. Love to have clinicians from the US send us their videos about their particular specialities, therapists if they're listening. So they are self-help videos where a clinician can actually say, if you've got this issue, these are things that you can do. And so we've got those, and I'm trying to find money to build a carousel library on our website so we can so it's very searchable and easy access. So that's the recovery at home videos. And then we have got the neuro directory signposting. So again, I'd love to hear from organizations in the US who actually offer neuro rehab services. Please tell us who you are and let us figure out how we can put that into our directory in some way. So that would be amazing. And then the last thing that we're trying to do is, again, you've mentioned it before, peer-to-peer support. So we're starting a pilot of buddies where we are working with a private neuro psychology team, and they are helping us do it in a very, very rigorous and safeguarding way, so that we have got a number of people who work with us who've had brain injury and have gone through their journey, and they're 3, 4, 5 years down the road, different ages, different genders, etc. And we're matching them to people who are coming to us newly saying that they've just had a brain injury. So that's what people say. You already said it. People just want to be heard, and people want to understand that they're not alone, because it's frightening and scary.
Yeah, and I really love that you're saying we do have to look at what we can do right now. Because for that person going through this experience, it's very real at this very moment. And this simple support, buddy system or someone to speak to, or that nurse who's actually willing to hear and willing to pay attention. That is so very important, because it gives that person who is struggling the feeling that they are worth it, that their story matters, and that it's important for someone to actually just listen. So we don't always have to fix what's going on for that person.
Yeah.
Simply listening can have a humongous emotional support effect in this place.
And even just defining what that is, that hasn't really been done very much. So we published a report that a clinical neuropsychologist edited for us. So she took 1,400 stories that we had received, and she categorized them. They're all anonymous, so there's no data issues. And she has put them into what people are really saying is actually in their minds and in their families' minds as they go through this journey. What do they really need? What do they feel? What are the big issues? So we've documented that, and people can have a PDF of that if they would like to come to our website and ask for it. It's on our website, they can download it. And then we just won a very small award with an animation that a wonderful girl called Jess Mountfield created. And she came to us because one of our great volunteers, Abby, has had a brain injury, and she's been extraordinary, and her mother's extraordinary. And so they have supported SameYou tremendously. And she put us in touch with Jess, who's a very, very talented young animator, brilliant, really, really, top person. And she's created this animation. But the great value to that is that we asked for people through social media to send in recordings of what it feels like to be a brain injury survivor, and what is the road to their recovery, and what does it look like. And so we've got a short animation also on our website that actually goes through the depth of despair that people go through, and their own stories. And then it ends obviously optimistically in the hope, because hope is what people want, and inspiration of others gives you the hope to get through it, as well as the support that you get from professionals.
And I will say, when I watched that video, I cried. And I cried for both reasons, because that's the stories resonated on so many levels inside of me, for everyone who had their story to tell, and for our common story. But I also really appreciated that we do have it within us to create hope, amongst ourselves and within the world, for within our own lives, but also in this kind of collective experience that all of the survivors have. And that keeps me going, that vision.
Well, look at you, look how wonderful you are, and how your recovery has been so successful.
Thank you. But just like many others, I was told actually not to tell anyone about my brain injury, or even, because who's going to actually want to get a consultant or who has a brain injury? And so my response to that was, well, you know what? I work in healthcare and in life sciences. That usually means that they work with patients. I'm now one, and I have done the undercover experience. So I'm
Yeah, I
more
love it.
valuable
Yeah,
than
I
ever
love it.
before. But you know, our sort of a logo locally here is the broken crayons still color. So I may have a
Yeah,
few things a little
lovely.
different up there, but boy, my colors are still very bright. And
I
so
love that.
yeah, and so it is for you. I mean, look at you and look at Emilia, what you guys have done, and now expanding that energy to so many people. That is such a gift to give.
But I think that one thing I'd love to say, if there's anybody out there who has got experience in helping build movements, because I know that there's so many people that are in communities that would love to come together and to work as a bigger collective, to be able to share their stories and call for change, and not just call for change, but demand change, because this community is underserved, and it shouldn't be, it mustn't be. So how do we make our voice louder by having the collective collaboration?
I
So
love this
anybody,
idea, the movement. The
they,
movement is a great word, right? It is it because it actually says it's a movement for change. It's a movement for positive change. And there are lots of organizations also, you know, I mean, in the United States, I work with several
yeah,
of them that are in the brain aneurysm space that do wonderful work. And there are local organizations as well. What's to say we can't all collaborate in the same movement, coming together the right way? So the
wouldn't it be
question is,
wonderful?
how do we do it, right? So call
We
for
do.
action. And talking about action, I think we have an
Yes.
announcement to make here as
Oh,
well.
yes, we
But
might have.
that's right. But before we go to the announcement, I have to ask you a couple more questions because you know we talk about in sort of really transforming brain injury recovery. That's kind of what I'm going to now summarize your mission. You are the transformer here. What will it take? You know, we talk about building partnerships, but what will it really take? What do you think it's going to take to transform brain injury recovery? Maybe globally. Let's go big.
So I think that my experience working for big consultancies, tech consultancies, is that you take the hypothesis, you look at the need, and then you try and do the proof of concept. So what I'm trying to do is to work with one organization to create a blueprint that can be lifted and shifted, to use old terminology, into any place in the world. So it's having the time and the right set of people in the room to create a particular scenario of what a new good could look like. And for us, working with UCLH in London, new good looks like an area where people can create both a physical center and a virtual platform, so that we can take new pathways of care and create a holistic innovation center. Now, to pare that down into simple to understand bits, if you look at rehab now, you have physical issues, you have speech and language, you have cognitive, and you have mental health issues. There are pathways that are not complete in terms of the therapy that could be made available today. And that requires linking great researchers and clinicians together and getting more funding and making those packages even better than they are today. So you come into a physical or virtual building, you are assessed. It's a day center if it's physical. It's obviously any way you like if it's virtual. And you can become part of a clinical trial. Now, the elements of the core, which I've just described, need to be supplemented by more holistic areas where there's a lot of research, but not enough, to try and understand how a new mental health pathway, for instance, designed with clinical neuropsychologists to help you recover, whether you've got anxiety, lack of concentration, whether you've got depression, whether your behavioral issues are very severe because of your brain injury or stroke, and how would you look at different ways of approaching this? And so we've got a concept of how we would take this, we would link it to all of the great work that many people are doing around the world using the arts to help heal. The performing arts, obviously with my daughter, and all of that. It can be dance, it can be singing, it can be poetry, it can be drama, it can be the visual arts, it can be actually being involved in group therapies that are choirs and people coming together to create stories, beautiful creative stories using their own experiences. And it can also be technology. It can be a place, a hub where we can work with technology startups who are in the neurorehabilitation space and seeing how they can have this group of people who need their treatments and to be able to take part in tech clinical trials. It can also be an education hub. It can also be a place where resources and people can be trained up and work right from nursing to clinicians in every multidisciplinary team there is. And then we can also be looking at healing buildings and the impact on your environment, the outside, inside, sort of Bauhaus concept of inside, outside, put into the 21st century and made into gardens and spaces where people can use the natural world and environment to heal. There's a place that we know in Wales, there's a small charity, and people go and they go into the woods and they make, using timber, they make, whether it's a small box or it's a shed or it's a house, and they come together as a group. And using things like that, pet therapy, animal therapy, those sort of things. And our blueprint is there. We've got the first draft of the blueprint. And what we're doing is we're trying to start and raise the money to start with a new mental health pathway. And then we're going to hopefully need more and more and more and more input from more and more people. And the way we see it is doing it collaboratively and then try and find the funding.
So what I love about the idea of the blueprint, of course, I am a consultant, so I like the approach very much. But it's also, it establishes a foundation for something that can evolve over time. Yes. And I see in this space the opportunity is once there is a frame for it, then the pieces that may already be started someplace else can also lock in. I mean, we can actually connect them, and that's the magic that can come out of that. So it ties to the collaboration, ties to a lot of the things that we have discussed. But we haven't discussed money, and I have to bring up money because this is a not-for-profit organization. And I just had another conversation with a leader of a not-for-profit organization not long ago. And I was asking, what is the role that not-for-profits, especially patient-centered not-for-profits, what is the role that they play in the overarching innovation scene if we think about healthcare innovation? What would be your answer there? What's the not-for-profit's role in advancing innovation?
Risk-taking.
Risk-taking. Oh my gosh, I love that. Say more.
Risk-taking because, again, working in my corporate life in global organizations, not many want to take risks, obviously. The world is in financial meltdown. Obviously, the world is in meltdown. And so how do you get people to take a risk? You actually, in my experience, you need entrepreneurs to take risks, and you actually need small organizations to take risks. And by working together to do that, and so the third sector, the not-for-profit sector, can be that bridge, can feed in the innovative ideas that are based on the patient experience to the clinicians. Now, the whole world, everybody talks to me about, collaboration with patients, co-creation, co-design. And then they start putting in all of these bureaucracy, all these levels of what it takes to make sure that everybody's included and of course they're right. It's all the right principles, but I just think that you've got to start somewhere. So I think that third sector and not-for-profit organizations, the voluntary sector, can come in and say, right, we're doing this, okay? We're doing this as a pilot. If it's going to work, who's going to come and adopt it? If somebody's got a better idea, who's going to come and adapt it?
Yeah, and even the data gathering, I mean, you already have a database you have a lot of data. I wonder if there isn't a life sciences company or a hospital system that couldn't benefit from that data, or sorting that data in a different way for their own purposes. So I think, so the not-for-profits are the organizations with the courage to take the steps, and sometimes these small steps that can actually lead to really big leaps, especially through the bridge building. I like that word, bridge building, and connecting dots. But on the money side, the not-for-profit does have to somehow get some funding. So if you just kind of look at the funding, we've talked about several really exciting things that are going on for your own organization. Do you want to put a dollar amount in the air?
Well, it depends. Well, I mean, there's many dollar amounts in the air, not very many in our bank. So, come on, guys. But really, if I'm looking at what we need for some projects, so I'm looking for 10 million to create a centre, a small centre in London, which is based on this blueprint. It's not the full blueprint, and that's a very long story, but to start off with our emotional mental health recovery pathway. So that's 10 million. But that is all to go to the cause. And what I find is really tricky is being a sensible person running this small charity and actually keeping enough to keep the lights on. Because it's very unsexy to say, oh, right, well, what do you need some money? Well, actually, to fund the wonderful, couple of people that we have working for us, to get our CRM system right, to build the website, to do the various things, and to hire people to help promote and to run our social media, etc. And so that's really difficult to find people that would give us a grant, a donation, to keep going. And so I think that that it's very hard to pin down to say what we would need. And what I would love, could I say what I would dream of having, not need necessarily, but I dream of having, is I would dream of having 500,000 that could be invested into SameYou as the charitable foundation, so we could build a slightly larger team, and that we could use resources, public relations resources, promotional, social media, advertising, to really spread the word, to gain awareness, so we can have a bigger database to be able to make these connections throughout the US, to enable us to be to spread what we're doing, because we've got quite a few of the elements that are really going to make a difference. But how do you do it to scale when you only have 2 or 3 people working in your
Absolutely. And we're talking about some really concrete other things as well that take resources. So building a directory, you have volunteer resources, but actually accelerating something like that to the next level, it can't just be volunteer resources. We all know that. And so there's that. There is also the opportunity, I think, in many of these other elements, the patient stories. I love this idea of, can we collect more of that, and how do we connect more
exactly.
with locally here? So, okay, so we have a dollar amount, at least now it's in the air. Once it's in the air, you never know where it ends up. And I do hope that we can keep spreading the word. So with that, are you ready for our big announcement?
Yeah, I think we should.
Very good. So what's happening in Spain in April?
In Ibiza.
Yes.
Ibiza. Well, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a cycling competition, a cycling extravaganza. And so we're really proud that we've already got tremendous support and help by a number of people who have enabled us to hire an organization to create a professional cycling event. Professional in the terms that it's not just a couple of us running it. So it's obviously for people who love cycling. It's obviously for people who have a connection with brain injury and stroke. It's potentially somewhere for people who've survived brain injury and have got their lives back and can want to compete themselves. And so it's the 21st to the 24th of April next year in Ibiza. And so it's a cycle fundraiser for SameYou. We are looking for people to come. It's a package where we want people to come and enjoy themselves. To come, they would have to pay their own airfare, their own fare to get separately. But there is a dollar amount around $1,500. It's actually 1,500 UK pounds, and I haven't converted it to dollars. But it covers 3 nights stay and your lunches and some food and accommodation. It covers all of the event participation, all the people, the safety, the people riding with you, the safety cars, all of the first aid, the organization, the drink stations, all of the things that you would expect from a cycle race. And it's quite challenging. There's just 2 different terrains, and more than 2 different terrains. And you can go, you can go for different lengths of journey.
I think it was 100 kilometers and 70 kilometers. I think those 2. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Right.
So there's two different types. One of different difficulties, and then one wonderful supporter of ours has offered to throw a party for us in a restaurant in the island. So there will be a wonderful evening meal and party get together to celebrate everybody's successes of actually doing the course.
So that's wonderful. And of course, if someone has not been on that island yet, I highly recommend. Absolutely beautiful, absolutely unbelievable place.
Beautiful.
Now,
really lovely.
My personal thing, I will be actually one of those people cycling. and that is so exciting for me. Fantastic. Because I used to cycle. I did actually mountain biking, and because I can't do that anymore. And it took me almost 2 years after my surgery to be able to actually get on the bike and bicycle well. I had a lot of balance issues. And now, and my big thing for myself was, if I can bicycle from one place to another, so I had this very specific route, then I will deserve a new bicycle. And I bought a new bicycle in 2018. My rupture was in 2016. And so this will be quite a challenge for me because, of course, I am not one of those professional cyclists. So I will probably be the person who will be walking this bicycle at the end. But the reason why I wanted to be part of the actual cycling is that, broken crayons still color. It may be not very fast, and I may not look very sexy on that bike. But I celebrate life with every moment. And that is a wonderful moment. But we're not going to stop there, are we? The real big announcement is...
You've got a great idea. Go on.
That's right. So Jenny and I, are announcing Team USA. Yes. And so what that means is we are actually starting to recruit now a Team USA of cyclists. And I will lead that team to what I call it Ibiza, because I'm Finnish. So this is the way we would pronounce the island, right? And I would actually love to have both local cyclists from California, but also all over the United States. We'll be reaching out to some cycling groups, professional cyclists as well. So hopefully we will see a lot of signups. We'll be announcing this fully in the next couple of weeks with all the directions as to how to sign up. And now I think we might have teams also by other regions. You're working on that, right?
No, we're working on that because the majority of the people we have signed up are in the UK and Europe. And so what the idea is that we are going to try and get a Team Wales, Team Scotland from Edinburgh, Team England, and hopefully Northern Ireland. So anybody else who's out there listening, whether you're in the States, but you might have connections to Finland, to France, who knows? So lovely ideas, very, very warmly welcome to try and make this a really international event. So Cycle Ibiza for brain injury recovery.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be a wonderful time. and a very meaningful time for us, for so many of us. So I appreciate you pulling it together. And actually, for those who think, well, how do we do it from the United States? Well, the good news is there's a lot of support, like you said. There's a great organization already now working on those logistics. I know because I have my cyclist package already, which includes, by the way, a training program. And I was so grateful for that, because I was going like, where do I start? And who's going to coach me through what I need to do? But there's so much unbelievable guidance in that package that I'm reading it now. And I'm going to get on my bike starting this week and training regularly.
And videos are coming, and we've got wonderful cyclists involved and who are giving their time and their expertise to help people get involved.
Good. So some exciting times. Ending this conversation, your one wish.
Oh, my wish. So I wish that we could just do one intervention that would really start a chain reaction. Now, it might be the online rehab program we've already done, or it might be some of the things that we want to do and we haven't done yet. But just to see how we can play our very small part in involving many, many people. So how can we be one of the stepping stones, maybe one of the first stepping stones to really make a change? And my real wish is how to build a movement. My wish would be that we would have a movement here. If we were here in a year talking to each other again, which I hope we could do, that we would say, my goodness, that wish came true. We have thousands of people already signed up to build a user-led movement.
And with that, we have a date. We are going to come back together a year from now, and we're going to take stock. And I'm going to ask everyone to help us so that a year from now, when we have a conversation, we also have a movement underway. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you. It's been a joy and a delight and an honor. Thank you very much.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Check out leadersagenda.com for information on our past and future episodes. And I do hope that you engage with us also on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, and post your comments about what you heard today and your ideas forward. Kiitos. Thank you.